I was 32 and a freelance photographer. I loved spending my weekends exploring abandoned places. A few months ago, I decided to check out St. Michael's Hospital. I had heard stories about it, disappearances, strange noises. That drew me in like a moth to a flame. I parked outside and stared at the old building. It looked eerie, almost alive, with vines creeping up its sides. As soon as I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, like something was waiting just out of sight. I thought about turning back, but my curiosity pushed me on. I snapped photos of the crumbling walls and rusted medical equipment. Each flash of my camera lit up the shadows. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the hallways. Then, I thought I heard something, a faint cry echoing off the walls. I shook my head. It had to be my imagination. I was alone, right? As I wandered further, I found rooms piled with dusty surgical tools and peeling paint. I traced my fingers over the surfaces, feeling the weight of history. One room caught my attention. Papers were scattered everywhere, yellowed notes from patients and staff. They talked about fears, feelings of being watched. I felt a shiver run through me but didn't let it stop me. I didn't come for ghosts. Deeper into the hospital, I felt a cold spot behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. My breath quickened. I raised my camera again. Maybe I could capture something strange. I focused on a corner, and just as I pressed the shutter, I saw it. A flicker of shadow that darted past. My gut twisted. What was that? I convinced myself it wasn't real, but then I heard a soft whimper. It sounded so close, yet far away. Panic surged through me. I pressed on, feeling invisible eyes on my back. I kept telling myself I was alone. My heart raced as I approached another room with its door ajar. I pushed it open and gasped. The walls were covered in scrawled messages, names, dates, and lines drawn over them, like a checklist of unfinished business. I felt sick. Were these past patients, lost in time? And then I heard it again. A voice, clear as day, whispering my name. I froze. My blood ran cold. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I stood there, staring into the dark corners, hoping for an explanation that would never come. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice shaky. The whispers stopped. I looked around, panic washing over me. It felt wrong, like I was intruding on something I couldn't understand. I left that place in a daze. I remember feeling utterly lost. I questioned everything, what I heard, what I saw. Was it real? Had my mind played tricks on me? I never found those answers, and sometimes at night, I still hear that whisper in my dreams. The next day, I tried to distract myself with work, but I couldn't shake the events from the hospital. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard that whisper again. I found myself Googling St. Michael's Hospital, hoping to uncover more details, to rationalize what happened. That's when I discovered the history of the place. Built in the early 1900s, it was known for treating patients with severe mental illnesses. Terrible treatments were conducted there, lobotomies, electroshock therapy, things that seemed more like horror stories than medical practices. It made sense that the weight of so much suffering lingered in the halls. Yet, I felt a pull to return. I had to know more. That weekend, I headed back. I parked my car, the building looming yet again like a great beast. I was nervous, but determined. A part of me wanted to capture whatever was in there. This time, I brought a flashlight along with my camera. I needed to be prepared. As I stepped inside, the air felt different. More charged, like electricity before a storm. I hesitated, but the memory of the whispers pushed me forward. I retraced my steps, heading for the room with the scrawled messages. I needed to find answers. When I reached it, I found something new. Papers were strewn across the floor, but they weren't just notes anymore. Someone had written over them with red ink, circling names and dates. I knelt, heart pounding, and examined the writings. One name stood out. Clara Jensen. Underneath was a date, 1967. Next to it the phrase, "still waiting." I gulped. Who was Clara? Why was she still waiting? I snapped a picture, hoping to figure it out later. As I looked around, I felt like eyes were watching me again. I turned, and there, In the corner, a figure stood just beyond the threshold of light from my flashlight. My heart raced. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, shrouded in darkness. I could barely make out a face, but it looked familiar, almost like a reflection of myself twisted in time. I wanted to run, but I felt frozen. The memory of Clara flooded my mind. I forced myself to step closer, and that's when it happened. A loud bang echoed through the hallways. The door I had entered slammed shut behind me, leaving me trapped. Panic surged. I turned back to the shadow. It was closer now, and I could see its eyes, wide and filled with desperation. "Help me," it whispered, the voice a haunting echo of my own. Before I could process it, the lights flickered, and then everything went dark. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking. I couldn't breathe. I was not alone. Something was there with me, and it was very, very real. I fumbled in the dark, trying to steady my breath. My flashlight flickered back to life, casting a weak beam in front of me. The figure had vanished. My heart pounded in overwhelming confusion, and I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Was it really there? Or had my mind played tricks on me? I swept the light across the room, desperate for some sign of life or reassurance. The shadows danced along the walls, creating shapes that taunted my already frayed nerves. My previous curiosity morphed into dread. It was time to leave, but the door behind me felt like a prison. Swallowing hard, I scanned the floor for the papers I had seen earlier. The red ink stood out, but now the words seemed to twist and shift as I focused on them. Still waiting. Who was waiting? Clara? I kneeled down, determined to figure this out. Maybe it would break whatever hold this place had on me. As I reached for a crumpled sheet, a colder breeze brushed past me. The air shifted, thickening with an unshakable weight. I shivered but pressed on. The whispers returned, not just one voice, but a cacophony, overlapping and chaotic. They begged and pleaded, and for a moment I felt pity. I made out muffled words, "Free us," and "Help me," the same plea I had heard moments before. Driven by a mix of fear and compassion, I shouted into the darkness, "Who needs help? What do you want from me?" There was silence, but the energy in the air crackled as if anticipation hung overhead. Just then, I saw something glint under a pile of papers. I reached for it, pulling out a tarnished locket. It felt heavy in my hand, the cold metal chilling my skin. I opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a woman. Her eyes were strikingly familiar. She looked like me. Startled, I stumbled backward. The flashlight flickered again, and the shadows grew deeper, more menacing. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, echoing memories I couldn't quite grasp. What was happening? Suddenly, the door behind me rattled. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. Panic surged again, and I scrambled to my feet, clutching the locket tightly. I had to escape. Ignoring the fact that I was still disoriented, I charged toward the door. As I pushed against it, the force from outside pressed back, but I refused to give in. I felt the resistance slip away, and in one desperate shove, the door flung open. I burst into the hallway, panting heavily. But as I ran, my flashlight beam swept over the walls, and I paused, breath hitching in my throat. There in the faint light, scrawled across the wall, were the words I had seen on the floor. Still waiting. Then, before I could even process the chilling coincidence, I felt a cold hand grasp my wrist. I twisted around to confront the figure once more, and this time, it was solid. The eyes bored into mine, pleading for an answer as the darkness closed in. I realized then that I wasn't just an observer. I was part of this haunting story, and there was no escaping it. I stood frozen, my heart racing, as the grip on my wrist tightened. The figure was almost human, but something about its translucent skin and hollow eyes told me this was not an ordinary encounter. The whispers surged, filling my ears with a frantic urgency. It was as if they were waiting for a response, hanging on my every breath. I looked deeper into its eyes, trying to find sanity in the chaos. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, a rush of frigid air surrounded me, pressing in like a suffocating curtain. Without thinking, I yanked my arm free and stumbled backward, nerves firing as I searched frantically for a way out. I couldn't stay here. I had to keep moving. The hallway stretched on endlessly before me, the dim light revealing doors lining each side. Some were cracked open, dark shadows lurking behind them. I took a shuddering breath and headed for the nearest door, praying it would lead outside. As I swung it open, I found myself in a small, sterile room that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The stark white walls were unsettling, contrasting sharply with the pervasive darkness of the rest of the building. My flashlight flickered, and I swept it across the room, revealing old medical equipment scattered like forgotten memories. Then I saw it, a journal lying open on a metal table. I approached cautiously, drawn in by the sudden urge to unearth its secrets. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the handwriting was still legible. I leaned closer, reading snippets about patients, their struggles, and one name that repeated, Clara. Clara, I muttered under my breath. Why was she haunting my thoughts? Suddenly the whispers grew louder, twisting together until I could almost make out coherent sentences. Clara needs you, they urged. But before I could process more, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and I felt an immediate sense of dread. I turned, ready to escape, but the door slammed shut. Panic kicked in as I pounded on it, the sound echoing against the walls. "Let me out!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the whispers. Then the flashlight flickered out completely, plunging me into darkness. My breath quickened, and I pressed my back against the wall, feeling for any edge of the door. As I fumbled in the pitch black, a soft glow began to illuminate the room. I squinted, relieved to see that my flashlight had flickered back to life. But as the beam brightened again, I froze. The journal lay closed now, and above it, something new was scrawled on the wall, in what looked like fresh blood. Find me. I felt a jolt of terror course through me. What did this mean? The voice, the figure, and now this. Everything was intertwined in a web I didn't understand. Adrenaline surged, and I knew I had to find Clara and confront whatever was at play. As I turned to look for another way out, I saw the figure standing in the doorway again, its face twisted in anguish, urging me to follow. I swallowed hard, not knowing if I could trust it, yet knowing I had no choice. A decision needed to be made. I took a step forward when suddenly the lights flickered out again. As shadows enveloped me, I heard a chilling threat drift through the darkness. "You shouldn't have come here." My heart raced as I realized I wasn't alone. I stood frozen, dread pulsing through me. The voice reverberated in my head, a sinister echo that left me paralyzed. I wanted to scream or run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The figure in the doorway seemed to loom closer, its features melting into the gloom. Then, a rush of instinct tore through me. I backpedaled toward the far wall, desperate for escape. The door was still shut tight, but I could feel a small window above me. Without thinking, I leapt up, straining to reach it. My fingers grazed the edge, but I couldn't grasp it. I was running out of time. The whispers shifted, growing frantic. "Find Clara," they urged again, more insistent now. I knew I couldn't ignore them. Still, I had to survive this encounter first. I looked back at the ethereal figure, which stood motionless, its eyes boring into mine. "Clara!" I shouted, feeling my voice sharpen against the stillness. "Where are you?" I didn't expect an answer, but the air thickened with a response, a chill that brushed against my skin, whispering her name. In a moment of clarity, I made my choice. I would follow. I turned and dashed across the room, feeling along the wall, searching for something, anything that could help me break free. Maybe it could lead me to Clara. Suddenly, bright light flooded the corridor outside, illuminating the space through the cracks of the closed door. A heartbeat of silence stretched, then the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. "Go!" they shouted in unison, and I flung myself toward the door. I slammed my shoulder against it hard. The sound of wood splintering filled my ears. With one final desperate push, the door crashed open, and I stumbled into the dim hallway. The air outside felt electric, charged with unknown energy. but the figure was right behind me. I dared a glance back and caught sight of it slipping into the shadows, its shape melding with the walls like smoke. My heart raced as I regained my footing and sprinted down the hall, the echo of the whispers still trailing close. A flicker of movement caught my eye as I passed another door. My flashlight caught a glimpse of something shimmering. I stopped short, pulling the beam back. There, on a table inside the room, was a pile of files, some half open. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach. Part of me screamed to keep running, to escape this place, but another part urged me to investigate. As I pushed the door ajar, an overwhelming sense of longing washed over me. The walls of the room were lined with pictures, each one depicting a young woman, her smile fading into shadow. I stumbled closer, and there, at the center of it all, was Clara. Before I could take it all in, the door slammed shut behind me, sealing me in once again. Panic clawed at my throat. I whipped around and my flashlight flickered one last time, casting an eerie glow across Clara's face in the photo, one that seemed almost alive. Someone, stood in the corner of the room. I opened my mouth to scream, but the words were strangled in my throat. That was when I saw it. The figure in the corner shifted slightly, the shadows bending and stretching around it like tendrils. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a woman, standing so still that she appeared to be part of the room itself. Her face was gaunt and pale, her eyes wide and hollow as they met mine. My heart raced, and the air felt charged with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. The flesh on my arms prickled, and every instinct screamed for me to flee. But my legs felt like lead, refusing to move. I squinted into the dimness, hoping for some sign of clarity. "Clara," I whispered, unsure if I truly meant it. The woman's gaze held me captive. Slowly, she raised a finger and pointed towards the wall, where a large, tattered piece of paper was pinned. I turned to see what it was, my breath hitching in my throat as my flashlight cast an unsteady light across the surface. It was a map, faded and torn at the edges, marking the rooms of the building in eerie detail. Labeled with names like isolation room and former patients, it sent shivers down my spine. Before I could study it further, the woman gasped, a sharp intake of air that broke the spell. The sound was raw, filled with a deep sorrow. "You need to go," she spoke, her voice barely a whisper yet cutting through the silence. "She's in danger." My chest tightened, my mind racing. "Who? Clara?" I stepped toward her, desperate for answers. But just as I reached her side, she suddenly vanished, leaving only the scent of decay and a cold wind that forced me to shudder. Instinct took over. I turned back to the door, but a flicker from the corner of my eye drew my attention. The pictures on the wall began to change, faces morphing into anguished expressions, mouths twisted as if they were crying out. I could almost hear their wails growing louder, filling my ears with despair. "No, I can't," I cried, stumbling back. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently and went out completely. Darkness swallowed me whole, plunging me into a suffocating void. I flipped my flashlight on and off, panic surging as the beam sputtered helplessly. My heart thundered in the silence, and all I could hear were the whispers again, swirling around me, urging me to flee, to find Clara. "Get out! You have to leave now!" they screamed. I grasped the wall, feeling my way back to the door. It was my only chance. My fingers danced over the doorknob, shaking with dread, when I heard it. A low growl, rumbling from somewhere deep within the shadows outside. I froze, a shiver coursing through me. Something was in the hallway. It was closer than before. I pushed against the door with all my strength, ready to burst into the corridor, but the whispers became a frenzy. "Find her! Before it's too late!" The urgency wrapped around me like a chain, but the growing menace on the other side of the door threatened to pull me back. Then the growl grew louder, and in that moment I knew. I had to make a choice. Stay trapped in this room, or confront whatever darkness lurked just beyond. I took a deep breath, threw open the door, and stepped into the unknown. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the dark corridor. I could barely make out the outlines of old furniture and remnants of what once was. The air hung heavy and stale, laced with moisture and mildew. My flashlight flickered inconsistently, casting erratic shadows that danced along the walls. "Clara!" I called, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just that growl resonating from somewhere deeper in the hospital. It crawled under my skin, urging me to flee, yet something, perhaps desperation, kept me moving forward. With every step, the growl shifted, almost as if it was following me. I squinted through the darkness, searching for anything that might provide clarity. I stepped into a room on my left, the word isolation barely visible on a rusted plaque. The door creaked open with an eerie reluctance. I felt a chill run through me. Inside, the room was bare save for a bed with fraying linens. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the air felt cold, as though the very ghosts of those who spent time here still lingered. I forced myself to explore, thinking perhaps there might be clues about Clara's whereabouts. Suddenly, I spotted something glinting near the floor, the corner of a metal box peeking out from beneath the bed. I knelt and pulled it free. It was old and rusty but manageable. My heart quickened again, this time with hope rather than fear. Perhaps there was something important inside. As I lifted the lid, a horrific stench wafted out, like a mix of rot and decay. I recoiled, but curiosity pushed me to peek inside. There were old photographs, black and white images of patients, along with names scribbled in faded ink. I recognized one of the faces immediately. It was Clara, her eyes bright and alive, a stark contrast to the woman I saw moments ago. Before I could process this discovery, a loud crash reverberated through the hallway, followed by the growl returning, furious and low. I scrambled to my feet, slamming the box shut. Panic surged through me. I needed to find Clara. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. As I burst back into the hallway, the growl intensified, now accompanied by scrapes like nails dragging along the floor. I turned to run, but froze when I caught sight of something at the end of the corridor. A shadow shifted, tall and unnatural, the outline of a figure looming in the flickering light. "Clara?" I whispered, the name a fragile thread in the oppressive air. The figure turned, and I caught a glimpse of hollow eyes staring back at me. Not Clara's familiar warmth, but something darker. I stumbled back, my heart racing as realization hit me. This wasn't Clara. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The presence shifted closer, the growl morphing into a horrid laugh that echoed around me. Desperation clawed at my throat. I turned to sprint in the opposite direction, my mind racing with questions. What had I stumbled into? In that moment, I had one thought. I had to keep moving. I had to escape this nightmare. But just as I turned away, I felt a hand grip my shoulder, icy and unyielding. That's when all the lights flickered to life, illuminating a horrific scene that made my blood run cold. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering uncertainly. The moment they illuminated the corridor, I knew I'd made a mistake. The figure standing before me was not just an unsettling shadow, but a grotesque imitation of a human, with features twisted in malice. Its mouth gaped open, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed too numerous for any normal mouth. I wrenched myself away, adrenaline surging through me as I bolted down the corridor. My breath came in ragged gasps, echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. I couldn't think about what I had just seen. All that mattered now was escape. The growl intensified behind me, morphing again, sharper and closer. I dared a glance back and saw it was gaining on me. This thing slinking through the shadows, moving with impossible speed. Panic surged, driving me to push my legs harder, urging them to move faster despite the burning in my muscles. I darted into another room, slamming the door shut behind me. It was dark, and I quickly scanned for a place to hide. The room was cluttered, filled with ancient medical equipment that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I crouched behind an overturned gurney, trying to control my breathing. The growl reverberated outside the door, a haunting sound that wrapped itself around my heart. I rested my head against the cold metal, desperate for some semblance of silence. I could hear scratching at the door, and I dared not move. The memory of Clara's smile haunted me. I couldn't fail her. I wouldn't. Just when I thought the scratching would stop, it grew frantic, vicious. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself not to think about what it wanted. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, as though whatever was on the other side was trying to force its way in. Its growl turned more of a shriek, a deafening sound that felt like it would crack the walls around me. Then, everything froze. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it had started. I cracked an eye open, heart racing, and peered from behind the gurney. But what I saw terrified me more than any growl or shriek ever could. The figure stood, backlit by the doorway, its head tilted in a way that suggested it was listening for me. I couldn't comprehend how it had remained so still. A moment later, it flickered and vanished, like a mirage. The silence hung heavy, pressing in. But where had it gone? I was too afraid to breathe, let alone move. Just when I sensed a fleeting promise of safety, the lights in the room started to flicker again, casting the figure's shadow on the far wall. That's when I noticed something glinting beneath the gurney. Curiosity mixed with fear as I realized it was another box. This one smaller and wooden, not like the last. With no time to lose, I crept forward, pulse pounding loudly in my ears. I could feel the tension in the air, the terror closing in around me. I reached for the box, and as my fingers brushed its surface, the lights flickered one last time before dying altogether, plunging me into darkness. I froze, holding my breath as I waited for the worst. Then I felt it, something cold wrapping around my wrist, pulling me toward the now closed door. I gasped, panic squeezing my chest tighter. It was not yet over. I yanked my wrist free, the cold grip shocking me back into action. Panic surged as I scrambled to my feet, heart racing. The darkness surrounded me like a heavy fog, strangulating any sense of direction. I had to get out of this room, had to escape whatever waited outside. With no light to guide me, I moved cautiously, my hands grazing over cold surfaces, dirty walls, rusted equipment. Each sound felt amplified in the silence. The gurney rattled softly as I bumped into it, sending a tremor of fear through me. I stilled myself, listening. Had the creature returned, or was it still lurking outside? The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't stand it. I took a hesitant step toward the door, feeling my way along the wall. An image of that figure flashed through my mind, the mouth gaping wide, those teeth glistening. I shuddered, pressing my back against the wall for comfort, even though I knew it would do little to protect me. I got to the door and turned the handle, half expecting it to be locked, but it twisted easily. I pushed it open just a crack, peering through the fading light beyond. The hallway was empty, yet I felt the weight of something else lingering just out of sight. Just as I considered stepping through, a thud echoed behind me. It came from inside the room. I whipped around, my heart in my throat. Something had moved in the shadows. I squinted into the darkness, but all I could see was a formless blackness. Another thud, louder this time. Fear coursed through me, urging me to flee. I darted into the hallway, forcing the door closed behind me. I was out, but the relief was short-lived. The flickering lights in the corridor cast long shadows dancing around me. I pressed forward, every instinct telling me to run. I rounded a corner and skidded to a stop. There it was, a second figure, standing at the end of the hall, blocking any path of retreat. My blood ran cold as recognition kicked in. This one looked almost human, but there was something grotesque about it too. Its limbs appeared too long, its skin eerily pale, almost translucent. I took a step back, breathing hard. Whatever this creature was, it was like a twisted reflection of myself, and it was staring right at me. I tried to move, but my legs refused to cooperate. Suddenly the creature smiled, a slow, grotesque curl of its lips that revealed teeth unnaturally sharp. It began to glide toward me, its stride smooth and unsettling, like a sick dance. As it got closer, I could feel something pulling at me, a compulsion to move. I tore my gaze away. I wouldn't let it lull me into a false sense of safety. My mind raced for an escape route. There was a doorway to my left, almost hidden in the flickering shadows. I bolted for it, the figure's haunting laughter ringing behind me, echoing down the corridor. As I slipped through the door, the laughter faded, replaced by a deep silence. My heart thundered in my chest, but the room was small and cluttered, much like the one before. I scanned for a hiding spot or anything I could use as a weapon, but there was nothing. Then I spotted something on the far wall, covered in dust. It was a mirror, cracked and tarnished. As I approached, my image flickered back at me, but I swore I saw a shadow behind me in the mirror. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the room, and the lingering sensation that I was not alone. Someone, or something, was watching me. A cold dread filled my stomach, and I knew that whatever I had stumbled into was far worse than I could ever have imagined. My breath was shallow as I stood before the broken mirror, my reflection staring back with wide, terrified eyes. I could feel the shadow lurking just beyond my vision, and a chill ran down my spine. Whatever haunted these halls wasn't finished with me yet. I took a step back, the echo of my footfall drowned in the oppressive silence. I had to make a choice: confront my fear, or allow it to consume me. With a surge of determination, I grabbed a nearby metal rod that had fallen from a table, feeling its weight settle into my palm. I wasn't going to wait and see what that thing behind the mirror wanted. I was done being a passive observer in this unraveling nightmare. "Clara!" I shouted, my voice piercing through the stillness of the room. "Where are you?" Silence met my call, and I felt absurd for even hoping she would answer. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stop searching for her. I had to find her before whatever darkness that filled St. Michael's Hospital claimed me too. I turned toward the door, gripping the metal rod tightly. I pushed it open cautiously, heart racing with every inch it creaked. Peering into the hallway, the flickering lights were still the only sign of life, casting eerie shadows that swayed and danced. I took a deep breath and stepped out, my resolve bolstered by the weight of the rod in my hand. The corridor was empty. I started moving cautiously to the left, unsure where I would find Clara, but needing to explore every crevice. I could still hear the muted whispers in my mind, urging me forward. I pressed on, my senses alert to every scratch of a floorboard or gust of wind. Then, I paused. That lurking presence returned, edging closer. I felt its air, a cold, suffocating force that seemed to wrap around me. I turned just in time to see the shadow dart away, slipping around the corner farther down the hall. Against all my instincts screaming at me to run, I pushed myself forward. "Clara!" I shouted again, anger rising behind my fear. "I'm coming for you!" I barreled down the hallway, following the shadow that now seemed to dance away from me, taunting. Each step filled with purpose as I cornered another bend, the walls closing in on either side. The hospital felt alive, pulsing with the remnants of fear and despair contained within its walls. Then I arrived at another door. A dim glow pulsed through the cracks, and I hesitated. Should I go in? My instinct fought against the fear. What choice did I have? I needed to find Clara. I shoved the door open and stepped inside. The room was vast and empty, save for an old surgical table and a splattering of dust. The glow that guided me now intensified, illuminating a wall where something moved. There she was. Clara stood there, translucent and serene, with a sorrowful expression etched deep across her face. But she didn't take a step toward me. Instead, she lifted a finger, pointing at something on the ground before her. "Clara!" My voice broke, relief washing over me. "I'm here. I've come to help." But just as I instinctively moved towards her, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I spun, panic flooding my senses. I pounded on the heavy wood, desperate to escape, but the whispers returned, swirling around me, the same urgent chorus. "Help us. She's still waiting." I turned back to Clara, confusion ripping through my chest. "What does it mean? What do you need me to do?" The faint light flickered, and in that moment, I could see Clara had changed. Her face, once calm, morphed into that pleading visage I had seen earlier, her eyes wide with an agonizing intensity. A voice, not her own, echoed in the space, drawing my consciousness deeper into the intensity of her sorrow. "Find the light," it whispered. "Release us. Break the cycle." I glanced down at the floor, and there lay a key, half buried in the dust. With newfound determination, I knelt to retrieve it, shoving aside remnants of helplessness and fear. The key felt cool against my palm, and in that instant, a surge of understanding washed over me. This key could unlock more than just a door. It could free Clara and all the lost souls tied to this grim place. The entire hospital shuddered. A groan echoed from its core, and I understood what I had to do. I scrambled back to the door and yanked on the handle. "Let me out!" I shouted, fear mingling with a fierce hope burning bright within me. The door swung open and I stumbled into the hall, the heavy weight of the key still clutched in my hand. But which door do I choose? I felt an unsettling shift, as if I was being watched again, an insidious presence lingering just behind me. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Which way?" I whispered, uncertainty tainting my previous resolve. Then I sensed her again, the figure from before, now emerging as a shadow at the end of the hall. I bolted after it, the whispers swirling louder as I approached, answering the beckoning with my every stride. "Follow me," the figure implored without words, leading me through the labyrinthine hallways. And behind me, I could feel the shadows ripple and warp, ancient emotions stoked into chaos, a powerful force growing angry at my defiance. But I had come too far. I would not give in now. Finally, we reached a massive set of double doors, nearly untouched by time but heavily marked with attendants. I thrust the key into the keyhole, my heart racing as a swell of energy coursed through me. "Let me help you," I swore, turning the key. With a decisive click, the door creaked open, flooding the corridor with blinding light. I stepped inside, half expecting to watch the darkness chase me away. But instead, I felt the warm embrace of freedom wrapping around me, washing away the tension that had gripped my chest. But behind me, shadows stirred, and the whispers held a final warning. "This isn't over." They echoed into the light as I crossed the threshold. I knew then that the relief would be temporary, the mystery unresolved. The hospital might fade from my vision, but the darkness would linger in the depths of my mind. I moved to a different city weeks later, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear those whispers receding into the dark. Was I free? Or was I just another name on that checklist of loss? I guess I'll never know.